Everybody here, or I'm assuming everybody here, is a creative person, somebody who writes or draws. So everybody here's got ideas. You fill sketchbooks, you make notes to yourself. And I'm sure everybody here has thought at one time, gee, I'd like to see if I could turn this into a TV series or a movie or whatever, okay? And in past years, the way to do that was to pitch the property to a studio or to a broadcaster, or possibly participating in a pitch contest at an animation festival or whatever, okay? My own background is for a period of about a dozen years. I was involved with pitching stuff. I pitched about half a dozen TV series, pitched about 3 features, and of all those attempts, got one project off the ground called Monster by Mistake that ran for 52 episodes on YTV. So the stuff I'm going to talk about tonight is stuff that's based on my personal experience, both pitching and seeing what happens when a project actually gets a go. Also my interest in various forms of pop culture history, jazz history, film history, comics history, where there are all kinds of stories about creators who, let's just say, were taken advantage of, okay? So the point I'm trying to make is right there in the title. Don't pitch a buyer, pitch the audience. And we'll take it from there. So why does pitching even exist? Okay, it's a weird thing. If you're a painter, you don't talk about what kind of color palette you're going to use and what your composition is going to be like. You show people the painting. If you're a poet, you don't describe what the poem's about. You recite the poem or you let somebody read it. If you're a singer, you don't tell people what your voice sounds like. You sing, right? But somehow, for certain fields, animation being one of them, you got to pitch. And the reason you've got to pitch is because animation takes too long and costs too much for you to come up with a finished product that you're going to try to take to the marketplace. You need money in order to make the thing. And that's why people in animation, people in film, people in television end up pitching. But it's important to realize that the pitch is a really poor substitute for the finished product. There's no relationship between the quality of the pitch and the quality of the idea. There are people who are extroverted and who are great at working crowds and people who are relaxed talking to strangers, and so they have a tendency to be good at pitching, but that doesn't have any relationship to the quality of their ideas. And then you've got people who are introverts, who are uncomfortable with strangers, whatever, and their pitching skills are not going to be nearly as high, but again, that says nothing about the quality of their ideas. There's also no relationship between the quality of the idea and the quality of the eventual product, because there's so many variables in between pitching and finishing that you never know how things are going to come out. You've got budget issues, schedule issues, the crew, input from investors. If it's TV, there's the time slot. There's the question of what else is out in the marketplace when your stuff comes out, okay? So all of those things are going to have an impact on the final product, and they have no relationship whatsoever to the quality of the pitch. There's other strange things about pitching. One of the strange things about pitching is you don't get paid to pitch. The person who's listening to your idea is getting paid to listen to you. You're the one with the ideas. They have no ideas. They're the ones getting paid. You don't get paid. You barely get paid to develop stuff. So in the event they like your pitch and they want to go forward with your pitch, the next stage is going to be throwing you some development money. And the problem with that is it's going to be a small amount. It's not going to be enough for you to quit your day job. And so as you're trying to push this project further, you're doing it on a shoestring. And the biggest problem with pitching is that the answer to most pitches is no. And so most of your ideas are not going to reach an audience because the gatekeepers stand in the way. And beyond that, if your idea sells, you lose ownership of the idea. And that's a really important thing. Once somebody says yes and they start investing money in it, they're going to end up owning it and you won't. you're going to have to hire a lawyer to protect your interests. You're going to have to hire a lawyer to negotiate your screen credit, your role in the production, and your financial compensation. Okay? And then there's the whole separate problem of Hollywood accounting, where even though projects make money, somehow when you look at the bottom line, they still show a loss. And so even if you've been promised a percentage of the profits, there may never be any profits to have a percentage of, at least on paper, even though somebody has made money off of your idea. I want to say, though, that there are no bad guys. I don't want to stand here and be vilifying studios or broadcasters or whatever. Creators see their work as polished and finished, okay? You don't go to somebody with an idea unless you've spent time thinking about it. You've, tried to form it, shape it, until you get it into shape where you think, okay, now it's ready to talk about. Buyers see the same work as raw material to be shaped to their needs. So you've labored over something for weeks or months until you think it's ready to pitch. As soon as they see it, they just see it as a lump of coal, and they got to figure out what they can do with it. Your idea will be changed based on what others think will make it successful. Okay? This is a really, again, important thing. And if you look at things from the buyer's perspective, they're making rational decisions, which is why I say there are no bad guys. They're investing a lot of money in your idea, and they want to reduce their risk as much as possible. And usually that means taking your project and turning it into an imitation of somebody else's project that's already successful. They believe that the changes they make to your work will make it easier to sell and easier to attract an audience. But the problem is that you may not agree with their decisions, and their decisions may also turn out to be wrong. So again, even when they say yes, it's a bit of a minefield. This is Stephen Pressfield. He's the author of the novel The Legend of Bagger Vance. He was hired to write the screenplay of the movie. And when Robert Redford got involved with the movie, he got fired. And he understood why he got fired. So this is a quote from him. "The original writer is a pain in the ass. He has ideas. He has a point of view. And the worst part is he believes he possesses the moral authority to give voice to these ideas. You have to get rid of the original writer." And that is, unfortunately, the standard feeling of people who are buying other people's ideas, okay? And the key phrase there is moral authority, okay? You've created something. Naturally, you think you know best. It's your idea. You created it. But the people who buy it from you disagree. And he goes on to say, the writer is not allowed to complain. You made the deal, dude. You cashed the check. Be grateful and shut up, okay? And unfortunately, again, that is the truth, okay? So we're back to what's wrong with pitching. You won't learn anything from failures caused by other people's decisions, as you never would have made those decisions yourself, okay? And that's an important point there too, okay? If it's all yours and you put it out there and it fails, you did something wrong. But if you sell it to somebody and they make changes to it and you put it out there and it fails, you don't know why it failed. You don't know if it was something you did or something they did. And when the project is done, you're not going to be able to continue working on it. You're going to be separated from your idea and your characters. And you can't work on it anymore without the permission of the owners, who may deny you permission or charge you a fee to keep working on your own idea. So this is undergrads. And I learned about this through guys with pencils. Pete Williams created the series Undergrads. It ran for 13 episodes on MTV. He's currently trying to revive the series, but he has to negotiate with MTV in order to get permission to work on his own idea. So how weird is it to have to get permission to work on your own idea? And how weird is it if they charge him a license fee to work on his own idea? Because that's the way corporations think. They own it. Somebody wants to use it. Sure, no problem. This is what you'll have to pay in order to use it. If your project is revived in the future, you may not be participating in it. Okay, this is Johnny Bravo. It's created by Van Partable. He had no part in seasons 2 or 3 of the series. Okay, so he created it, worked on it for the first year. They didn't invite him back. Okay. Other problems are that you've made a deal with somebody and maybe you've got a reasonable personal relationship with them, but managements may change, the company may merge or be sold, and the new people in charge won't have even heard of you and will have no relationship with you. Okay, so again, once you give up ownership of something, it's really hard to maintain any kind of connection to it. Does pitching have an upside? Yeah, it does. Okay, I don't want to be wholly negative about this. You'll meet people in positions of authority. Okay, if you're going to go talk to a broadcaster or you're going to go talk to a studio, you're going to end up meeting people way higher up than just artists. Okay, you'll enlarge your network. Always a good thing. And it may lead to opportunities that you didn't anticipate, meaning they don't like your idea, but they have another show and they think you'd be good to work on it, so how about you come work on this show instead of the one you came to pitch. So you may end up with a job out of it that you didn't anticipate, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you really care about your idea, don't pitch it to buyers. If you get somebody interested, it's going to be altered beyond your control. And at best, you're going to have to share ownership, and you're probably going to lose ownership completely. Okay? Want to talk a little bit, short side trip into Monster by Mistake. If you never saw the series, and that's okay, the premise was there was a small kid who got mixed up in a magic spell, and kid had allergies. And every time he sneezed, because of the magic spell, he turned into a 7-foot-tall monster. I did it intentionally where it was something like a sneeze that was involuntary. I didn't want a magic word or a magic ring or anything like that. I wanted it to be involuntary because I wanted turning into a monster to be a metaphor for any kind of a problem that a kid had that he couldn't get rid of, that he had to live with. Okay? Whether that was going to be a health problem, or a social problem, or a family problem, or whatever, okay? Nobody's really going to turn into a 7-foot-tall blue monster. It's general enough, hopefully, that kids could make a connection between whatever their own problem was and the problem of the kid in the show. And I always wanted the show to be an adventure and a comedy, okay? But I wanted there to be that undertone of seriousness to it. I was sitting in a meeting with the director of development of YTV, which ended up running the series, and our producer, who was part of another company, but we needed him because he had the track record, and we didn't at that point. And the director of development of YTV said, being a monster can't be like having a disease. It's got to be fun. And in less than half a second, the producer, our co-producer partner, said, right. And in just a few seconds, my entire concept of the show was blown out the window. And at no point did either of those guys even look in my direction to see what I was thinking, and let alone say, so what do you think about that? You created this thing. How do you think that's going to play? Nothing. Okay? So again, you need to know this. The fact that somebody has bought your idea, you think it's a blessing, it may not be such a blessing here. I want to talk a little bit about art versus business. Because most artists don't understand business, and most business people don't understand art. Creative people have an emotional connection to their work. Okay, I think everybody understands that as artists. You have an emotional connection. You do something, and you have that connection to it. And that emotional need, that connection, is what motivates the creation in the first place. And it's what keeps you working on the idea even though there's no money attached to it, just because you've got this intrinsic interest in this idea. Business people have no emotional connection to their product or service, only to the profits, okay? Entrepreneurs are sometimes different, but not always. But the majority of business people are not entrepreneurs, and they're focused on profits, not on the product or service. And if something isn't profitable, business people will kill it without a second thought. Okay? Never ever forget that Disney threw away drawn animation. Okay? Didn't matter that they had, you know, a 60 or 70 year history with it, that it was an intrinsic part of their brand. As soon as it got to the point where it didn't look like it was profitable enough, they just tossed it without a second thought. Okay? So if Disney will do it, anybody will do it. Business people have no trouble violating the integrity of an idea if they think it'll increase profits. Okay? And if that idea is yours, it's painful. And it's why owning your own work is so important. No one's going to protect your work more than you. And what this is a question of competing agendas. You want to see your ideas on the screen the way you realize them in the first place. The buyers want to protect their investment and make a profit. If their ideas and your ideas don't mesh, they'll throw your ideas out and use their own. Okay? Again, a reality. So what defines success? Success doesn't come from a studio or a broadcaster saying yes. Success doesn't come from a project being produced. Success only comes from the audience liking a work. That's William Goldman. Okay, he's a screenwriter and novelist. He wrote the screenplays for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Marathon Man, All the President's Men, and he wrote the novel The Princess Bride that the movie was made from. And his famous saying is that in Hollywood, nobody knows anything. And by that he means nobody knows what's going to be a hit or a flop until it gets in front of an audience. Jerry Seinfeld says, audiences will teach you what's funny about you. So again, you think you're funny? Well, maybe, maybe not. It's the audiences who are going to end up deciding if you're funny or not. These are the only people who can make something a success. Okay? And unfortunately, as animators, we're separated from these people. We're not like Jerry Seinfeld, where we're standing in front of the crowd and we're finding out if the joke works or not. You know, there's always months and a screen in between the work we're doing today and eventually finding an audience. So it's tough to figure out if the audience really likes what you do. What's the value of your idea? It's unknown, and this is one of the big problems. It's why creators are treated shabbily in terms of control and compensation. The value of the original idea is unknown, but the value of the financial investment that the buyer is making is known to the penny. Okay, so again, it's an unequal partnership right there. So without proof that your idea has an audience, you have no proof of the idea's value. You have no bargaining power with the people you're trying to sell to. This is the root of the problem. It's not a relationship of equals. Okay, they've got the money, they've got access to the marketplace, you've got an idea. It's very unequal. How can you negotiate fair compensation if the value of your idea is unknown? You can't. And the gatekeepers who are passing judgment on your idea don't know how good or bad it is either. If they really knew, they would never buy things that turned into failures. And they buy stuff that fails all the time. What engages the audience? Characters. Characters engage the audience. Everyone in this room recognizes these characters. All of them were created for animation. Okay, so they didn't come from books or comics or toys or anything else. They were all created for animation, and everybody knows who they are. If I take this thing out to Queen Street and I start showing this to people walking down the street, they're all going to know who those characters are. Everybody's going to know. This is Chris Meledandri, producer of Ice Age and the Despicable Me movies. He says, we start with strong characters and build a movie from there. So I'm going to show you some stills from animated shorts that won the Oscar since the year 2000. So these are not obscure films. These are films that won the Oscar since the year 2000. Don't say anything. Just mentally click off how many of these you recognize. I'm going to show you 4, okay? How many people, by a show of hands, recognized all 4 of those films? Nobody, okay? These films won the Oscar, okay? And they're in your field. They're in animation. And it's since 2000, so it's not like it's ancient history, okay? And nobody here knows all 4 of those films. How many people know 3 of those films? Okay, I got like 4 or 5 people. How many recognize 2 of those films? Okay, more, all right? So the point is, everybody recognized those characters, and you who are in the field couldn't recognize what those films were. Okay, and just for the record, okay, that's Father and Daughter, that's The Moon and the Sun, John Canemaker's film. This is A House of Small Cubes, and this is The Lost Thing. Okay, just so you know. But again, no continuing characters, one-off ideas, and you don't know what they are. If you're making films to please yourself, that's great. I mean, who can argue with that? But don't expect the audience to share your concerns, okay? You've got to share theirs. You want to look for the overlap between your interests and the audience's interest. That's the sweet spot you want to work in. A quote from Chris Gillibeau, wrote a book called The $100 Startup, which is great if you're trying to figure out how to start something on a shoestring. Focus relentlessly on the point of convergence between what you love to do and what other people are willing to pay for. Okay? So you've got to find what the audience is interested in. Artists and the audience don't look at the world the same way. And again, just like artists and business people don't look at the world the same way, you don't look at the world the same way the audience looks at the world. There's a difference between you. Artists love looking at art. Okay? I guarantee you, you could easily name half a dozen artists whose work you enjoy just sitting there looking at. That's inspirational to you. Audiences don't care about art, and they don't care about animation. And that's a hard thing to accept, but it's the truth. Okay? What they want is they want characters that entertain them. That's it. And do you want proof? Okay? Everybody in this room can draw that well. And most of you can draw better than that. Okay? Right? It's the truth. But nobody in this room is as successful as the guys who created South Park, and that's because they understand what the audience wants, and the rest of us don't. Okay? So people get hung up on, design and shading and everything else, and the truth is that is a huge success without all the stuff that we consider important and we want to put into our work. Okay? This is Seth Godin. He's a marketing guru with several best-selling books to his name. So he wrote an entry on his blog which says, "But what if I fail?" And his response is, "You will." A better question might be, after I fail, what then? And his response is, well, if you've chosen well, after you fail, you'll be one step closer to succeeding, and you'll be wiser and stronger, and you almost certainly will be more respected by all of those that are afraid to try. Okay? I'm moving into an area now where I basically am going to talk a lot about failure and why you shouldn't be afraid of it and why, in some ways, it's a good thing. And when you fail, you want to fail fast and cheap. Most ideas do fail. Okay? We've all seen this. The new TV season starts, and by the end of the season, the majority of the shows are gone. Okay? It's the nature of the beast when you're putting stuff in front of an audience. Most things fail. And so you want to fail fast and cheap. This is Asa Raskin on the right. He's one of the designers behind Firefox, the web browser, which I'm sure people are familiar with. He says, your first try will be wrong. Budget and design for it. Okay? So again, it's going to fail. But it's what you do afterwards that counts. So, if you spend years on something before the audience gets to see it, you've wasted a lot of time. If you spend a lot of money on something before the audience gets to see it and they don't like it, you've wasted a lot of money. The faster and cheaper you get your ideas in front of an audience, the better. If they don't like it, you haven't wasted a lot of time, you haven't wasted a lot of money. Fantasy versus reality, not in terms of what you put on the screen, but in terms of what goes on in your head. We all have fantasies that once our work reaches an audience, it's going to change our lives. We'll be famous, we'll have money, our careers are going to move to a whole new level, but the truth is probably not. Okay? Most likely our work is going to be another drop in the ocean of media and barely noticed. Okay? Monster by Mistake did not change my life. If it did, I wouldn't be teaching right now. I'd still be making TV shows. Okay? There are benefits to failure, as painful as failure is. While nobody likes to fail, it's a great teacher. If you can survive failure, you've learned something that'll make your next idea more likely to succeed. The more you fail, the more you learn. The faster and cheaper you fail, the more opportunities you have to succeed. Gatekeepers, the buyers, stand between you and the audience. And even if they like your idea, they're going to slow it down and they're going to make it more expensive. So if you fail, gatekeepers will cause you to fail slowly and expensively, which is not the way you want to fail. So you want to start small. While we all have dreams of making TV series or feature films or whatever, those dreams are for later. First, you want to create an idea and get it to the audience. Find out if the audience likes it and will pay for it in some way. And if you can build an audience for your idea, you'll eventually get the chance for those bigger dreams. So on the left is a still from one of the Disney's Laugh-O-Grams made in Kansas City, and on the right is a still from Fantasia. Okay, so I mean, he started there, he ended up there. Okay, it took years. On the left, those characters are called Wilkins and Wontkins. They're early Muppets by Jim Henson. They were used to advertise coffee, 10-second commercials. They're all over YouTube. Go look at them, they're great. But on the right, you've got the characters from The Dark Crystal. Okay? So again, took him years. Wasn't the next day, and it certainly wasn't the first thing he did. That's an Apple II. Okay? You probably have those in your pocket right now. Okay? These big things over here, these are disk drives, but they're not hard drives, they're floppy drives. Okay, so something that was like that big had to go into that in order, and I don't know, it had like 600 kilobytes of memory or something. Okay, again, it took years. It took years, sorry. All right, there you go.
144.
All right, okay, the point is, you gotta start someplace, okay? You gotta start someplace. None of the preceding creators started by creating their ultimate dream. Okay, Disney didn't make Fantasia right out of the box. It wasn't going to happen. They started small, they found their audience, and then they built their projects with audience support. Without an audience, they never would have reached their goals. Okay, if Apple wasn't able to sell the Apple II and the Macintosh, the original Macintosh, there'd be no smartphones today. It took them years, and it's going to take you years as well. And you've got to have that realistic sense of how long things are going to take. Creating something that an audience likes is hard. Building a business around it while you sustain it is also hard. So don't quit your day job, okay? Because it's going to take a long time before you get to the point where you've got enough income from an idea that's a success that you're going to be able to quit that day job. You want to avoid gatekeepers. I should go back to this. You want to avoid gatekeepers and go directly to your audience. The sooner the audience judges your idea, the sooner you'll know if you've got something of value or not. The tools to reach an audience are available to everyone, and this is a huge difference. I mean, I was pitching Monster by mistake in the early 90s when the World Wide Web was like literally just being born. Okay? Now, the tools to reach the entire world are in everybody's grasp. Okay, and you know the names as well as I do. YouTube, Vimeo, Twitter, Blogger, WordPress, Facebook, Vine, Instagram, Tumblr, blah, 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 blah. Everybody's got them, okay? So the entire world is potentially your audience. And you don't have to do anything except sit at your keyboard and hit enter. That's it, okay? And obviously you want to use social media to spread the word. You've all got probably Facebook accounts or Tumblrs or whatever. So if you've got an idea, you've got no problem getting it to the audience. However, you want to read the terms of the agreement. Before you post your work to various sites, read the terms of service agreement very carefully. Do they claim ownership of your work just by the fact that you've posted it with them? Have they cloned your copyright? And by that I mean they don't claim ownership to your work, but they claim the right to use your work any way they like forever in any medium once you've posted it to their site. So something else to be careful of. And if they're making money from your work through advertising or through some other means, how much of it's coming back to you? You're probably smarter to set up your own website so that you've got more control and use these other sites to drive traffic to your website. And as a little sidebar, you want to avoid contests. They're really a racket. Their terms generally give them permission to exhibit and edit your work in any media forever, just for entering. Okay? So you throw something in there, and they own it, and they do whatever they want with it forever. So why would you want to work for free for somebody else when you could work for free for yourself? You want to monetize your audience. From the first day you bring work to the audience, you should have something to sell. Maybe you'll charge for the work, maybe you'll charge for merchandise, maybe you'll charge for special access to you or to your work in progress. The difference between a hobby and a business is income. Until you've got income, it's just a hobby, okay? This is topatico.com. They mostly work with comics people. But once you've got something that's a success, these people are happy to come in and take care of all your merchandising for you. Okay? You've got to be established. They won't bother with you if you're an unknown, but once you're established, they're happy to be there and take it off your hands. For a cut, obviously, but still. There are suppliers who'll make custom t-shirts, posters, coffee mugs, etc. in small quantities for you. So again, you know, you've created a character, stick it on a t-shirt, stick it on a coffee mug, make it available to people. eBay and Etsy, two online marketplaces where you can sell your stuff if you're not going to be selling stuff through your own website. This is a Frazetta painting that I think originates from the 1960s. It was on a Conan paperback cover. It's more than 40 years old. It's now on a foam cover that sells for $18 US. Okay, so it's great. It's 40 years old. It's still generating revenue for the Frazetta estate. That's the benefit of ownership. When you own stuff, you can continue to make money from it years and years after you've created it. All right? If you pitch and you sell your idea to Nickelodeon or Disney or to Chorus or whoever, they're going to be the ones making money on your stuff 40 years later, not you. This is Dick Figures. Fundraising sites like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, or Patreon are more effective when you already have an audience. Dick Figures, the movie, raised $313,000 on Kickstarter, but it was already a series of videos on the web. Okay, so people already knew about it. They had their audience, and then they went to Kickstarter and they raised over $300,000 to make a longer project. But a look at all the animated projects on Kickstarter shows that many have less than $100 pledged. These sites are not the answer to building an audience. They're only the answer to monetizing an audience that already exists. Okay? That's Simon's Cat by Simon Tofield. It's a web animation. There's now 30 shorts available on YouTube. Okay? The YouTube channel has 2.7 million subscribers built up over 5 years. And the first episode, and that's a still from the first episode, has been viewed over 46 million times. Okay, think about that. That's 1.5 Canadas have watched that cartoon. Okay? It's like no matter where you go in this country, have you seen that one? Yeah. Have you seen it? Yeah. Everybody's seen it. Okay? So look at all this merchandise. Okay? Calendars, jewelry, cat beds, cat bowls, coffee cups, t-shirts, fridge magnets, coasters, cookie cutters, plush toys, Christmas cards, and there's at least 6 books available on Amazon. Okay? So there's like 30 shorts on YouTube. They're free. Anybody can watch them. But he's monetizing his audience by making this stuff available. Right? And it features a continuing character. Okay? As I pointed out earlier, people love characters, the cat's in all of them, and it's been designed for the web. There's no color, which makes it faster to produce. There's no dialogue, which makes it play internationally, also cuts down on your recording costs. There's no music except over the opening title, and it's always the same music. And they're short. Okay, they're easier, they're faster, they're cheaper to produce than a TV show or a feature film. So there you go. It's always a comedy. So that makes it a consistent audience experience. It's aimed at cat owners, an existing demographic, okay? And it's important. If you design to the limitations of your medium and appeal to an existing demographic, you're on your way to building an audience. So, you know, have you got a hobby or an interest outside of animation that other people share? Because if so, there's an audience out there that you could be working with. Okay, you could be satisfying them, supplying them with stuff. This is a comic strip called PvP. It's written by a guy named Scott Kurtz, and it's aimed at the gaming community. So people who play video games, read this comic. This is a comic strip about a hardware store. Okay, Russell Johnson ran a hardware store and did a comic strip about hardware stores for a trade journal for 40 years. Okay, so he was a hardware store owner talking to other hardware store owners through comics. Okay, again, an existing demographic, not one that you'd naturally think of, but it was there and he had an audience. So if you've got a hobby or job that's got an existing community outside of animation, and it doesn't have to be outside of animation, there may be an audience waiting for your work. So once you have an audience, everything's different. If you wish to deal with larger companies, you now have leverage, which you didn't have before when your idea was of unknown value. You've got proof that your idea has value, judging by the size of your audience and your income from the idea. You can afford to walk away from bad deals because you've got independent income from your idea. You never want to give up ownership. Again, there may be people who disagree with me on this, but I feel pretty strongly about this. Large corporations know the value of owning intellectual property. That's why they spend a fortune to convince governments to keep extending the length of copyrights. Okay? When I was growing up, maximum copyright was 56 years. Now in the United States, corporate copyrights, 95 years. And sometime in the next 5 years, there's going to be another extension on the copyright. Wait and see. Okay? It'll go up to 120 years or something. There'll never be anything in the public domain again. Why? Because corporations know intellectual property has value and they don't want to let any of it go. Don't sell your creation, license it for a finite period. Deals with other companies should always have an expiration date. So if the relationship goes sour, you automatically get the rights back when the deal is over. You should never have to negotiate or pay to recover rights to something you created. Okay? Let's say you've created an animated series and somebody comes to you and wants to do books with your characters. Great. If you sell them the publishing rights, you've lost control of the publishing rights. If the company gets bought or merges, or the company decides that they don't like your characters anymore and they're going to stop publishing your books, you're out of luck. You can't go to somebody else and say, publish my characters. Not unless you go to them, the original publishing company, and you buy the rights back. Okay? So if you have licensed the rights to them for a finite period of time, all you have to do is sit there, and eventually the calendar will click and the rights will revert to you, and you don't have to worry about it. You should never have to negotiate or pay to recover rights to something you created. Nobody cares as much for your idea as you do, and nobody cares as much about your welfare and success as you do. If you achieve success, you want to protect it, and you do that by keeping ownership of your work. So a final thought about all of this. What do you love more, your idea or animation? And this is a really important question. If you love your idea more, there are faster, cheaper ways to get it to an audience and find out if the audience likes it. All of the following have been created by people who have worked in animation. Okay? This is Beanie and Cecil as a puppet show from the 1950s. Okay? Bob Clampett was an animation director at Warner Brothers, worked on Bugs Bunny, Porky Pig. He got into TV in the early years. The show was on 15 minutes a day, Monday to Friday. He knew he wasn't going to get the budget to produce that much animation, so he took his ideas, he turned it into a puppet show. Okay? Which eventually came back to being an animated series several years later. Mike Kunkel, professional animator, did his idea as a comic book series, Hero Bear and the Kid. Storyboard artist Katie Rice does a webcomic called Camp We Don't Want Ya. Storyboard artist Vera Brosgol created a graphic novel called Anya's Ghost. Director and animator Chris Sanders and director and animator Dean Yeagle published sketchbooks. Tony Fucilli, animator, character designer, does kids' books. Bobby Chu and Kay Asadera, locals, sell prints. And they've also done a motion comic called Nico and the Sword of Light, which you can buy on iTunes. Okay, and again, this is sort of a halfway between comics and animation, but still faster and cheaper than doing it as animation. And if your idea is successful, you can bring it to animation later, after you've got the audience and after you've got the income. So, in summary, keep ownership of your work, get it to an audience as quickly and cheaply as you can to see if anybody likes it. If you can build an audience, monetize it. And if you fail, learn from the failure and try again. And don't do business with a larger company unless you can prove the value of your work, because it's the only way to protect yourself and to protect your property and protect your interests, okay? If you can't prove the value of your work, even though it might be the greatest idea ever, you're in trouble. It's an unequal relationship. Because if you're negotiating from a position of weakness, you're going to be stepped on. It's a fact. So, any questions or complaints?
Yeah. What if you set up a situation with a company where you've leased them the idea and they've got some kind of like E&O insurance or something like that, or completion bond or something like that, and the insurance company takes it over? Does the insurance company take over your lease, or have they?
Well, okay, first of all, you'd have to look at the actual agreements, right? Who knows? But if you've only leased the property till a certain date, then theoretically, you know, yeah, the completion bond company will take it over, but as of that deadline date, it should revert to you anyway. You know, your agreement was to loan the material for a period of time, and that's it. And once that period of time is over, it should come back to you.
Just from your personal experience, if you're pitching to something, or you're pitching to somebody, you want something to get made that's your, you know, something that you have a personal connection with, how much of your own personal, you know, you want to have that made, do you put into it, while also combining with how much you think other people are going to like it?
Again, that's a tough call. It's like if you're pitching because you just want to get an idea sold and you don't care if they change it, then by all means go ahead and pitch it. You know, if you've got no emotional connection to it and you don't care if they turn it upside down and inside out, go ahead and pitch it. Why not?
So, follow-up question, did you ever say anything about when that monster by mistake thing, when those people turned around and said, we want it to be not a mistake? That
in that case, no. Okay? There were other points in the production where decisions were made where I was extremely vocal about it, but I was still ignored. Okay? I mean, there were some yelling matches, but I was still ignored. Again, my feeling, and again, everybody's got to make this decision for themselves, but if you feel an emotional connection to this idea and you think it should be a particular way, you have to be prepared for the fact that they absolutely will change it. Okay? And again, from their perspective, they're doing things to make the project more successful. They're not evil people. They're not trying to make you feel bad. You know, they're going to adjust the demographic. They're going to try to bring in elements that have been successful in other shows. It's the nature of the beast. So you've got to be prepared for it. And if you're not prepared for it, don't do it, I guess. Yeah?
Last year you blogged about Sony's...
Yeah, that was a good one.
Any follow-up on that?
Yeah, apparently now they just want people to send them links to websites. So because they're not taking possession of the material, they're only looking at material that is publicly available. They are not worried about any kind of legal problems with ownership for it. Okay, to fill people in if they're not aware of it, Sony in California was looking for storyboard artists. And to just submit your board, you know, your portfolio, they were claiming ownership of your artwork just for submitting, okay? And obviously if you had done work professionally before for another company, you didn't own the rights to that artwork. You know, if you had done boarding for Disney or boarding for Nickelodeon or whoever, you obviously didn't own the rights to that artwork. So legally, you couldn't show it to Sony because as soon as you showed it to Sony, they assumed they owned it, which wasn't going to be the case. And you didn't want to show them personal work because then they would own your personal work. So it was a ridiculous situation where literally you couldn't apply for the job if you cared about keeping control of your own work. And as I said, they've changed that now because I think they realized that they had overstepped their bounds. And it was probably lawyers who were just trying to protect Sony. Again, they're not evil. They're not conspiring to defraud artists. But some lawyer said, you know, we might run into trouble, but if we claim ownership of everything we see, then we're off the hook. But obviously it didn't work. It obviously didn't work. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
Regarding negotiating with potential clients, hi.
Hi.
If you're at a position where you need the job, but then you have to also protect your interest, and I've come across situations where as soon as you start protecting your interest, the client backs off.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with such a
Yeah,
situation?
again, you know, you've got to decide depending upon the particular situation. Okay. And I think this is especially true for people who are character designers. I think that is a whole ball of wax in terms of, you know, they want to pay you a flat fee and own the design forever, and you want to say, well, wait a minute, if you're going to use this design for 20 years and you're going to stick it on 50,000 items, then either give me a royalty or pay me more money up front. And it gets really complicated. And, you know, you never know. I mean, a lot of times you do artwork for somebody and they use it once or twice and then it disappears and that's the end of it. And other times you do artwork for somebody and everywhere you look, you see your own artwork and you know they paid you $100 for it and they're making, you know, they're using it a lot and you're not getting what it was worth. It's a real roll of the dice. You never know what's going to happen.
So you just take the risk and protect.
Well, I don't know if you take the risk, but you've got to make the decision based on how badly you need the work.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. It's like, you know, have you got the rent check? And if you haven't got the rent check, maybe you're going to say yes. But my feeling is if you've got the rent check, don't say yes. Anybody else? Yeah.
Is there a way to protect your material once you submit it to a studio? Like, let's say you submit a Bible and then you don't hear anything, but then you find that that thing gets made. Is there a way to protect that, or?
Usually, studios or broadcasters have you sign a release form before you submit. And the release form essentially says, we may be developing something similar to what you're about to show us. And you acknowledge that fact, and therefore you are, you know, by signing this agreement, you agree that you will not sue us. And again, you're kind of stuck. You're kind of stuck. It's like if you don't sign the release form, they won't look at your stuff. And if you do sign the release form, there's a chance somebody's going to lift something from it.
So, in that instance, then, there's crap, I can't talk very normally. In that instance, then they're not licensing your idea, so you still have the ability to resell it, though, don't you?
Yeah, you do. I mean, if you pitch something and they say no, you own it. You take it anywhere else you like. But there have been occasions, and they're not very frequent, to be honest, because companies don't want legal trouble. They don't, you know. But sometimes people are dumb within the company, and they look at something and they think, oh, that's great. Let's do something like that. But if they turn your idea down, you're free to go elsewhere with it. One of the problems right now is that essentially there's only two markets for animated shows in Canada. One is controlled by Chorus and the other is controlled by DHX. Between the two of them, they own just about every channel that would broadcast animation. They don't own the CBC and they don't own TV Ontario, but TV Ontario pays peanuts. And the CBC isn't exactly rich either. So now these days, if you're pitching a TV show, you've got two companies to talk to. And once they turn you down, you're done. That's it. I saw a hand somewhere in the back. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, let's say you sign a document when you pitch to a company. Can you pitch to another company on the same, like during the same period of time until you don't hear anything? Or?
Yeah, why not? Why not? Okay, again, there used to be in book publishing, they used to consider it bad form. You know, you'd submit your novel or whatever to a publisher, and then you had to wait until you got a rejection or an acceptance before you could pitch it somewhere else. But my attitude is, if they're going to tell you in a reasonable amount of time, we'll get back to you Friday or whatever, then sure, wait a couple of days. But if they're not talking to you and you call them up and say, hey, any progress on evaluating that? And they say, no, we haven't had a chance to look at it yet, or we need to take a meeting and we haven't got the guy in the office yet, pitch it elsewhere. If you've got more than one place interested in your stuff, that's fabulous. You know, you hope if you got somebody else who says, you know, I like this, go back to the first company and say, you know what, I got this other company on the line here, you better move fast because I'm going to make a deal with them. That's leverage, and you're not going to have it otherwise. Yeah, sorry.
I was curious about this idea that you just said about people evaluating it. As far as I knew, I thought that you don't leave any paper in the room, and they basically say yes or no in the room.
No.
And that you don't leave documents around because that's when you get yourself in
Well,
trouble.
the problem is the people you pitch to don't have the authority to say yes. Okay? They've been put there to field the pitches and sort them and decide which ones are interesting. But before they commit real money to it, they've got to go upstairs. And they got to talk to people, they got to talk to their bosses and say, this is what I've got. You know, which one fits our schedule or fits our advertisers' needs. And that's another problem with talking to a gatekeeper. Even if they love it, there's no guarantee that the people on top of them are going to love it. And so as a result of that, you know, you still may get nowhere.
And they might not be able to pitch it as well as you did to them.
Yeah, you have no idea what they say in that meeting,
Yeah.
you know, and maybe they pitch it better than you, who knows, but you have no idea what they say in that meeting, how they present it to their bosses. Yeah.
Can you talk further in detail about the broadcasters in Canada? Like you mentioned there too, but can you talk more in detail about?
Well, okay,
how
Chorus
animation-
owns YTV, they own Teletoon, I think they own Cartoon Network Canada, am I right? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry? Yeah, they own Treehouse, okay. And then DHX owns Family Channel and some other stuff too, and I can't remember what. Sorry? Okay, great, okay. So, you know, you think, oh yeah, well I can go try YTV and I can try Treehouse and I can try Teletoon, but they're all the same company, okay? And again, to give you an example, Alan Gregg was the development executive at Teletoon and he's gone now. He left last month and it was like not very well known. People are surprised by this. So if you had been pitching to Teletoon and you had been shaping your material to satisfy Alan Gregg, you're back to square one. Because he's gone and you have no idea who's going to be sitting in that chair next, and you've got to start building that relationship all over again. So all the time that you spent trying to build relationships with people at the broadcast level is potentially wasted time, which is why I say the faster and cheaper you can get your work to the audience, you know, that's not wasted time. Then you'll know something real instead of trying to cultivate somebody who may change jobs and you've got nothing to show for it. All the way in the back.
What's your opinion on the small micro broadcasters that are showing up on the internet, like Mondo Media and Federated?
Be careful. They take your rights too. They do. I've got a friend who talked to Mondo. He's made some independent shorts. He talked to Mondo. They were willing to finance a pilot. They were willing to give him a whopping $5,000 to finance a pilot. And if they decided to go into production with it, they were going to own the property. So his attitude was, you know, the pilot it's poverty wages to make this thing, and if it's a success, I lose it. So he decided to stay away from them. Anybody else? Yeah.
I don't know how much you know about this, but for some companies like Mondo Media that are purely online, how do they go about making their money? Is it purely through advertising? And if so, would it be smarter for you to just try and start your own thing rather than one of those companies?
This is the reason I brought up Simon's Cat. Okay, it's totally his own stuff, his own channel, right? He's not in with anybody else. And there's advertising on YouTube, and I assume he's getting a piece of the advertising because he's had, you know, millions of views, so I have to believe they're throwing him some money to keep him there. Plus he's making the money on the merchandising. I have no idea how Mondo would go about doing it, but I would guess advertising would be their main income source. And again, if somebody creates a continuing character for them, they'll merchandise it. Yeah.
How do companies deal with broadcasters in terms of making them a project and then getting that project greenlit and everything on that end?
Again, everybody should understand that if a Canadian broadcaster says yes, the money they're giving you is a fraction of the production budget. It's not enough to make the show. So you end up having to go out and make deals with broadcasters in other countries or finding a distributor who'll give you an advance based on, you know, the fact that they think they can sell the show in whatever countries.
I meant not just the individual, I meant like a company, like say another animation company wants a project to get put on to a broadcaster and they have to make deals. So like how does that arrangement work with like getting that project greenlit and finding out what project they're going to be able to broadcast?
You just pitch the stuff. Whether you're an individual or you're a studio, it's the same process. You walk in with some material, whether it's, you know, a sample script or a Bible or character designs, you do your pitch, your song and dance, and then somebody says yes or no. But if they say yes, as I say, you've still got to go outside of Canada to find the rest of your money to make the show a reality. Anybody else? Yeah.
Just a footnote about Simon's cat. Somebody actually pulled it off as reel and
Yeah.
put it on YouTube first.
Yeah, so he didn't even put her on YouTube. Yeah, and it was the luckiest thing that ever happened to him, that's for sure. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you all very much.
Okay, so I just made like a fake cover for Josie and the Pussycat just to show you. If it was a real comic cover, I would have left some space on the top because for the name of the comic, but it wasn't a real, so yeah. So before this sketch, I did a bunch of smaller sketch, like basically stick figures, just to see the composition where I wanted the character and everything. I forgot to save this one, so here's the more final sketch. When I know I'm going to colors, I don't do better sketch than that. It's basic, yeah, that stays pretty messy. After I do a few color tests, I didn't make that much, but yeah, a few ones. After I just basically do backgrounds, and after I do flat colors on the character. After a few details, the microphone, the other character in flat color, and with details. It was the same with the drum, and the other one. Once all the flat colors are done, basically, I start doing the more shadows and light. So here's a little bit of ambience. Lights, and here's just like a hue and saturation layer on top of everything just to check on